You guys explain to me about the apartment. You have your own room?
Yes.
And your mom?
Yes, she has her own room.
She has her own room. And your sister?
She stays in the same room as my mom.
Stays in the same room with your mom? And tonight, who was all there?
Me, my mom, and my sister.
You killed her? Alright. What type of knife was it? Do you know?
It was just a big kitchen knife.
That big?
Yeah.
What color was the handle?
Purple.
Purple?
Yes.
Okay. Your mom was sleeping?
Yes, she was sleeping.
Okay.
I intended to kill myself before, but I couldn't.
Okay. And then what did you do?
I decided to call my friends to tell them what happened, and then I said goodbye to my friends.
You called them before you decided to try to shoot yourself, or afterwards?
After.
Okay. Did you send them any pictures?
Yes.
How many pictures did you send them?
I sent them 2 of my mom and 1 of me.
Okay.
On October 12th, 2023, an unexpected call shattered the peace at the 911 emergency center in Gallia, Florida. At 11:30 at night, on the other end of the line, a teenager's voice, with tears, urgently pleaded for help. His mother, he claimed, was lifeless. The operator, with remarkable composure, tried to gather details and an address. However, the young man struggled to recall where he lived. This prolonged the call for over 10 minutes until they finally managed to obtain the necessary information to dispatch law enforcement to the scene.
I'm okay. My mom's not okay. She's dead.
Do you need fire rescue? Are you hurt?
No, I'm not hurt. I just have a little bit of blood on my hand.
What officers discovered upon arriving at the residence ignited a complex investigation, bringing to light a case that, due to its unsettling nature and numerous unanswered questions, deeply affected the entire community. Derek Rosa was born in Florida, United States, on August 26, 2010. While his arrival brought joy to the family, it occurred during a challenging time. His parents, Irina Garcia and Jose Rosa, were navigating difficulties in their relationship. Shortly after Derek's birth, they decided that separation would be best for everyone involved. Despite the distance, Derek maintained a very close bond with his father, whom he visited every weekend in Broward County. Jose Rosa, a former military serviceman with 22 years of dedicated service, was a significant role model for Derek. In fact, the teenager harbored dreams of following in his footsteps and becoming an engineer in the armed forces. On the days he wasn't with his father, Derek resided with his mother, Irina, and his stepfather, Frank Ramos, in an apartment complex in Hialeah, Florida. Frank, a Cuban truck driver, spent a considerable amount of time away from home due to his profession. Nevertheless, he had managed to forge a respectful relationship with Derek, who also looked up to him as a role model. The family had moved to Hialeah in 2022 with aspirations of growing. Irina and Frank both longed to have children together, a desire that eventually came to fruition. Soon after, Irina shared the exciting news with Derek that he would be an older brother to a baby girl. The young boy openly expressed his excitement. These joyous moments were immortalized in family photos, depicting everyone smiling happily. This reaction came as no surprise, as Derek was known for being a kind, well-behaved, and somewhat shy boy, always standing out for his exemplary conduct, even among adults. Derek never caused any trouble. At middle high school, where he was in 8th grade, his teachers recognized him as an outstanding student who consistently earned honors. Thanks to these qualities, the family quickly integrated into their new neighborhood. The other residents of the complex held them in high regard, especially Irina, who always presented herself as friendly, cheerful, and with a radiant smile. It was common to see her running errands, accompanied by Derek, who would help her carry groceries. There was not the slightest indication of any problems in their daily lives. Everything appeared calm and normal. That's why what transpired on the night of October 12, 2023 was an absolute shock that left everyone bewildered. Without anyone being able to foresee it, the peace of the community and the Rosa family was shattered in an unforeseen manner. It was 11:30 at night when the 911 emergency service received a disturbing and confusing call. On the other end, 13-year-old Derek Rosa urgently requested assistance from the operator. The woman who answered asked him if he was alone or if someone else was with him. The boy stated that his mother and his 2-week-old sister were also in the house. But when the operator asked to speak to his mom, the horrifying truth came to light. Derek had no other choice but to confess that his mother was lifeless and that there was blood everywhere. He himself had murdered her with a kitchen knife. The baby, his sister, remained inside the house, at the mercy of whatever might happen. The operator maintained her composure and attempted to gather more information. She inquired if anyone else had been injured and where he had left the knife he used. Derek stated that his sister was sleeping in her crib, mere inches from where he had stabbed his mother, and that, fortunately, she hadn't woken up at any point because otherwise he wouldn't know what to do. But when he tried to answer about the knife's location, he became frantic. It wasn't where he thought it was, and he couldn't find it at that moment. Derek also confessed to the operator that after murdering his mother, he had taken one of the weapons his stepfather kept in his bedroom closet with the intention of taking his own life, but he ultimately gave up. During those minutes, Derek only displayed emotion about what he had done on 2 brief occasions. At the beginning of the call and when asked why he had murdered his mother. For the remainder of the conversation, his emotional state shifted drastically. In fact, at times, he seemed proud of his actions. During his conversation with the operator, Derek admitted to taking photographs of his mother's body and even selfies showing his blood-stained hands. He sent these photos to Sweden, a friend he had met 3 years prior while playing video games online. The conversation lasted 17 minutes. Since Derek didn't know his exact address, the operator guided him until he found an envelope in the house and provided the necessary information. Finally, with the address in hand, police authorities arrived at the residence within minutes. They then discovered that everything the boy had recounted during the 911 call was true. His mother's room was the scene of a massacre, and, oblivious to the horror, the baby slept soundly in her crib. Officers immediately contacted Derek's maternal grandmother, not only to inform her of what had transpired, but also to request her presence at the scene to care for the child, while they transported the teenager to the police station for questioning. Before commencing the procedure, the officers read him his rights. The teenager claimed to understand everything they were telling him, but his demeanor suggested he was confused and disoriented. Even so, he agreed to answer all questions without the presence of an attorney. It was already dawn when Derek began to describe in meticulous detail how he had taken his mother's life. He stated that he had been home all day with her and his sister. Around 10 o'clock at night, everyone went to sleep, but an hour later, he got up, went to the kitchen, took a knife, and walked to Arena's bedroom. Before he continued his statement, the officers asked him the color of the knife handle and which parts of his mother's body he had stabbed. Derek recalled that the handle was purple and that he had struck the carotid artery with it. He knew that this method would cause her to bleed out quickly and end her life as soon as possible. It was disturbing for the officers to face a 13-year-old boy who narrated his mother's murder with little difficulty, showing not the slightest hint of remorse. They noticed that Derek's hands were still bloody. It was then that the teenager began to feel uneasy. Nevertheless, he continued to answer every question. Everything he recounted was consistent with what he had told the 911 operator hours earlier, but when they inquired about the motive for his actions, the fluidity of the interrogation came to an abrupt halt. Derek requested to use the bathroom, and upon his return, he refused to continue speaking without the presence of a lawyer. The clock struck 3:05 a.m. when the interview ceased, and although investigators had obtained a confession and had no doubts about who had committed the crime, they still had an arduous task ahead. Authorities launched the corresponding investigation with the goal of finding evidence that would help them determine the circumstances in which the murder was carried out, but above all, to understand what had driven Derek to do it. One of the first findings was the purple-handled knife Derek had described in his statement. It was found next to his newborn sister's crib, covered in blood and with a broken tip, clearly showing the brutality of the attack. Upon reviewing Derek's computer, investigators discovered that around 6 p.m. on the day of the murder, the teenager had made disturbing Google searches. What's the best place to stab someone? Carotid artery diagram in image. Is a small knife good for murder? And can a knife cut bone? Were some of the questions he typed into the search engine. With this evidence in hand, investigators concluded that it was not an accident, but a premeditated act. Furthermore, the house's security cameras provided images of the family's final moments. The device installed at the main entrance of the residence recorded Derek leaving the house around 8:30 p.m., while his mother was breastfeeding the baby on the living room couch. Before leaving, Irina told her son not to run, to which he replied, "Why do you always tell me not to run?" This everyday exchange could suggest some tension in the mother-son relationship, but on the contrary, the tone of the dialogue was not aggressive, so a possible fight was ruled out. A few seconds later, the same camera captured Derek re-entering the house and his mother in the same position. It was never revealed whether Derek was preparing for the attack or what he was truly doing outside the house at that moment. But the key video, accessed by investigators, which proved to be extremely unsettling, was captured by the camera installed in Irina's bedroom, pointing at the baby's crib to monitor her while she slept. These images showed the exact moment of the attack. At precisely 11 p.m., while Irina and her daughter were sleeping, Derek was seen from behind, entering the room and stabbing his mother without warning. The forensic examination revealed that Irina Garcia, 39, received a total of 46 stab wounds, with her calves being the only parts of her body without injuries. While murdering his mother, Derek assaulted her with homophobic insults, which caught the investigators' attention. Derek's double confession, internet searches, security camera recordings, and forensic analysis were enough for authorities to build a solid case against him. But it was especially delicate because he was a minor. Derek Rosa, 13, was arrested and initially sent to a juvenile detention center. However, due to the severity of the crime and because he was charged with first-degree murder, authorities decided to transfer him to the Metro West Detention Center, an adult jail located in Doral, Florida. Nonetheless, measures were taken to ensure his safety. Derek was placed in an individual cell, not exposed to common areas, to avoid contact with other inmates, and had constant surveillance. Since his arrest, Derek has undergone numerous psychological evaluations with professionals at the facility. One psychiatrist suggested the possibility that he suffered from attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, while another considered he might be on the autism spectrum. However, this latter possible diagnosis was insufficient to explain the violent act he had committed. Still, some professionals affirmed that studies show that an undiagnosed or untreated person with ADHD might have difficulty controlling their fits of rage or anxiety, which could lead to erratic decision-making. None of these evaluations were considered by Judge Richard Harris, who presided over the pretrial hearings against Derek, held in December 2023. The magistrate based his decision on the existence of a diagnosis prior to the minor's detention and on the fact that he had never, at least until the time of the crime, shown behavioral signs indicating that he needed to be evaluated. Derek's defense was handled by Dale Cetriello and Jose Baez, a highly reputable American lawyer known for representing defendants like Casey Anthony, a 22-year-old woman acquitted after being accused of her baby's murder, and Harvey Weinstein, the film producer convicted of dozens of abuses, among many others. The lawyers focused their strategy on getting the teenager transferred back to a juvenile detention center. To do so, they argued that his confinement in an adult prison violated his constitutional rights, and that Due to his young age and possible disorders, he was not fit to remain in such a dangerous environment. During the hearings, the defense presented testimonies from instructors who worked at the jail and interacted with Derek almost daily. The math teacher described the accused as a typical teenager with the same learning abilities as any other child his age. Conversely, the language instructor stated that Derek showed difficulties in comprehension and that lessons were continually interrupted because he did not understand what was being taught, which cast doubt on the observations of other teachers who had taught Derek. Furthermore, a forensic psychologist indicated that Derek might be experiencing a desperate crisis and that his possible autism diagnosis could be an influential factor. But the judge dismissed this testimony because it was not based on a direct evaluation of the young man, but rather on records noted in the medical history compiled after his arrest. In contrast, the prosecution presented audio evidence where Derek could be heard confessing to having murdered his mother. Upon hearing himself, the teenager broke into tears, showing signs of distress and remorse for his actions. That same day, he was seen exchanging notes with his lawyer and with obvious uneasiness. Finally, despite the defense's efforts to get Derek transferred to a juvenile facility, Judge Richard Harris denied the request and ordered that the accused remain detained at Metro West Prison. The trial, initially scheduled for December 2nd, 2024, was postponed multiple times due to a persistent dispute between Derek's lawyers and the prosecution. The defense insisted they had not received all necessary evidence from the prosecution, making proper trial preparation difficult. It was reported that the lawyers demanded witness reports and images captured by the camera in Arena's room. For its part, the prosecution affirmed it was ready to proceed, which created tensions between both parties. Meanwhile, as of the recording of this video in March 2025, Derek Rosa remains behind bars and spends most of his day locked in his cell, awaiting the trial that will define his future and in which he will be judged and possibly sentenced as an adult. Out of 24 hours a day, he only gets 1 hour to play basketball or soccer with an inmate his age. As the details of the crime he committed gained public attention, the controversy surrounding the case expanded and divided opinions soon emerged. Despite his double confession, a group of people raised their voices to defend the teenager's innocence, while others believed the incriminating evidence collected by the prosecution. This debate initially arose due to the absence of a clear explanation for his motives to commit the crime, resulting in the spread of various theories on social media and discussion forums. On one hand, close relatives such as his biological father and maternal grandmother have expressed their unconditional support for Derek, asserting that he is a noble and kind boy and could not have been capable of committing the crime, suggesting that other factors or people might be involved. This stance fueled speculations about the possible influence of third parties on Derek's actions. Based on this, one of the most discussed theories online implicated Frank Ramos, Derek's stepfather and Irina's husband. Although authorities never considered him a suspect or a person of interest in the case, some users questioned his possible involvement. These suspicions manifested in an online petition called Save Derek, where a group of people who believed in the teenager's innocence questioned the evidence presented by authorities, claiming inconsistencies. First, they highlighted the call Derek made to 911 on the night of the incident. A second voice can be heard in the background. On the other hand, an image captured by the camera in the room was circulated showing a subject on top of Irina while she slept. The Save Derek Rosa organization claimed it was not Derek, as the physical build of the person in the image was much larger than the teenager's. Another theory that caused considerable uproar concerning Frank Ramos was based on his Facebook account. The public claimed that several photos showed the truck driver accompanied by a woman and a child who were not Irina or their newborn baby. Users alleged that Frank Ramos had another woman and daughter in Cuba, and that after Irina's murder, he had brought them to live with him in the United States. Finally, the truck driver drew suspicious gazes from the public because it was learned that Derek's lawyers wanted to conduct an inspection and take measurements at the crime scene. He refused to let them in. His argument was that the house had already been cleaned and intervened by Jose Rosa, Derek's father, and his maternal grandmother. Thus, none of these theories were supported by concrete evidence, and therefore they did not affect the official investigation being carried out by the authorities. This case has generated intense public debate about the mental health of young people and how the justice system acts when minors are accused. Derek Rosa remains in prison awaiting the start of his trial. It is believed to take place starting in April 2025. His father and maternal grandmother, convinced of his innocence, have been fundamental pillars in his defense and have worked tirelessly to ensure a fair trial. In an effort to cover legal costs, the family launched a fundraising campaign that has exceeded $140,000 in donations. This financial support reflects that the community remains divided between those who support Derek and those who seek justice for Irina Garcia. What many are asking is, what was the reason Derek Rosa made the drastic decision to cold-bloodedly murder his mother? This will probably be one of the major unanswered questions of the case. Or perhaps everything will take an unexpected turn and the investigation will go in a different direction. Is Derek Rosa guilty or innocent? What do you think?